The day Qingchao first met Lu Kuang was not an ordinary day. Even the historical records did not overlook that day. Under Lu Kuang's orders, the grand historian repeatedly emphasized it, and the chronicles recorded in the annals of history also spoke of the king's heartache. The woman he loved left him on that day. Everyone knew that it was thanks to Qingchao's father, Grand Tutor Yi. Qingchao had never forgotten the scene of that day, an early winter night, with light rain falling. The hoarse sound of the Vermilion Palace doors opening echoed as she lifted her skirt and crossed the high threshold of the Weiyang Palace. In front of her was her father's tall back. Looking past her father, she saw the person collapsed on the ground. She had never seen the emperor's face before, and what she knew about him came only from the fragmented words of those around her. But the black and gold imperial robe he wore indicated his identity. At that moment, however, his sorrowful expression was far from the majesty she had imagined. Just moments before, outside the hall, she had heard his cry of anguish. A-Xing. She looked at the woman in his arms, not a great beauty, but of ordinary appearance, especially overly thin, with only a slightly swollen belly. If this child had been born safely, it would have been his firstborn son. Now, with both lives lost, even Qingchao felt a pang of sorrow. She, who had no acquaintance with Empress Wei, also felt the pain he must have been experiencing. So later, when Lu Kuang came to hate her, she always felt it was understandable. Your Majesty, Grand Tutor Yi saw his daughter approaching and pointed at Qingchao as he spoke to Lu Kuang. This is my daughter Qingchao, who will be your empress in the future. People said Qingchao was fortunate. Grand Tutor Yi's life was full of ups and downs. From a minor military officer, he rose to power and control, experiencing numerous life and death struggles in the chaos before he could command the entire realm. Unlike her brother Yishao, who roamed with their father from a young age, Qingchao was born when Grand Tutor Yi made a decisive move, defeating the Hor family that controlled the north and subsequently taking control of the Central Plains. That was the most important victory of Grand Tutor Yi's life, and thus the birth of his youngest daughter was seen as a stroke of luck. He cherished her like a treasure. As the legitimate daughter of the Yi family, Qingchao learned court etiquette from palace ladies from an early age. Even the common folk in the counties knew that the Yi family's daughter was destined to become the mother of the nation. At that time, the emperor on the throne was Emperor Huai, so Qingchao never thought that she would marry Lu Kuang in this life. Fate often writes the most absurd scripts. The timid emperor, who trembled even in her presence, was eventually trapped by a group of eunuchs in a small palace in the Shoa River Palace. He died miserably, his body uncovered, surrounded by his own filth. Her future husband died in such humiliation. Her father led troops to quell the eunuch rebellion and, upon his return from Shoa River, comforted her, saying, "Qing'er, do not fear. I will find you another husband who is unmatched in talent and appearance." This kingdom needed a new ruler, and she needed a new husband. But despite her father's comforting words, she knew it was just to soothe her. How could they choose someone truly unmatched in talent and appearance? How could the Yi family allow the new emperor to possess talent and virtue? A few days later, news came from the court. The ministers had decided to invite Prince Linzi, Lu Kuang, to the capital to ascend the throne. It was said to be a decision by the ministers, but it was really Grand Tutor Yi's will. The servants at home tirelessly praised Prince Linzi's extraordinary intelligence in front of her. She knew well how much truth was in their flattering words. Thinking about Prince Linzi, she believed he couldn't be someone her father and brother feared. So, what talent could he have? But everyone can be mistaken, including the great Grand Tutor Yi. For Grand Tutor Yi, choosing a new emperor was also choosing a son-in-law. When Lu Kuang was still a prince, he was unremarkable among his brothers. Even the licentious former emperor had labeled him as mediocre and unambitious, unfit for use. The only thing that earned him any fame was his appearance, more delicate than that of a woman. No talent but good looks, which made him the perfect candidate in Grand Tutor Yi's eyes. The only unsatisfactory part was that Lu Kuang already had a wife. During those 2 years, Qingqiao had never seen the new emperor. But on the night of the enthronement ceremony, she saw the former Princess Linzi, later Empress Wei-Ying. According to custom, the noble ladies were to visit the Changqiu Palace that night. She entered the palace with her mother. Before they reached the Jiaofang Hall, the wives of the ministers came up to greet them, showing more respect than to the new mistress of Changqiu Palace. The edict to infect the empress had not yet been issued, so Empress Wei was still just noble Lady Wei. The noble women understood that the position of the central palace would sooner or later belong to Qingqiao, so they performed the courtesies befitting a noble lady. Qingqiao was the only one that night who stepped forward and bowed according to the rites for an empress. Noble Lady Wei was slightly taken aback, but quickly masked her surprise, personally helping Qingqiao to her feet with a smile, concealing her apprehension in her heart. Qingqiao did not know that Wei Ying mentioned her to Lu Kuang that very night. Today, I met Madame Yi and the young lady of the Yi family. The palace servants had been dismissed. She still lowered her voice. Only in front of her would Lu Kuang let down his guard, holding his wife's hand casually and asking, "And truly the daughter of the Grand Tutor?" Just this one sentence made Lu Kuang never let down his guard against Yi Qingqiao. Due to the upcoming ceremony to enthrone the new empress, Empress Wei's funeral was kept simple. Even the custom of noble women entering the palace to mourn was omitted, making her perhaps the most destitute empress in the Yu's history. The second time Qingqiao saw Lu Kuang was in the Sishan Hall. From afar, she could hear the chanting of monks, the sound of wooden fish mixed with the weeping of palace servants. These people knelt outside the hall, while inside, he sat alone in front of the casket, dressed in plain mourning clothes. It was the saddest back view she had ever seen in her life. The eunuch announced her arrival, and the palace servants all bowed, finally startling him. He slowly turned around, his gaze passing over the crowd to look at her. His eyes were filled with undisguised hatred, a hatred that later permeated every moment of their time together, becoming an unyielding frost that seeped into her long life. Qingqiao stopped. Probably no one believed she came only to offer incense for the deceased, and he wouldn't believe it either. Lu Kuang turned his head away, as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "Yi Qingqiao, leave her alone. You can go anywhere in this palace, but not her spirit hall. Don't come again." She lowered her eyes and nodded, then suddenly thought that he might not have seen her since he wouldn't even look at her. So she replied softly, "All right." When the new emperor ascended the throne, Grand Tutor Yi did not immediately make his daughter the empress, as everyone expected. At that time, the political situation was still unstable. The hard-headed officials in the censorate accused him of holding the emperor hostage to control the nobles. It took 2 years to purge the court and quell the rebellions across the land. During those 2 years, although Wei Ying was Lu Kuang's wife, she remained just a noble lady. Until the news of her pregnancy spread in the palace, Lu Kuang insisted on making her empress. Unexpectedly, Grand Tutor Yi agreed. The ceremony was grand, but Qingqiao couldn't understand her father's intentions. He told her, "Qing'er, don't worry. What is yours, no one can take away." The bad premonition in her heart came true a month later when Empress Wei died in the Jiaofang Hall. Her father personally led troops into the palace, and her brother exterminated the entire Wei family. When Qingqiao stepped into the Jiaofang Hall, Wei Ying was lying in her husband's arms, her body cold and lifeless. The so-called evidence of the Wei family's treason was obviously fabricated by her father and brother. It made no sense for the Wei family to plot rebellion at that time. She asked her brother why they had to be so ruthless, and Yi Shao said she was being soft-hearted. Because she was carrying the imperial heir, and that was reason enough for her to die. Yi Shao looked at his sister affectionately. "Only your child can become the crown prince of Diyu. Qing'er, Lu Kuang is not worthy of you. What is worthy of you is his kingdom." Qingqiao shook her head. Wei Ying's words that she was truly the daughter of the Grand Tutor were not accurate. She did not feel like a daughter of the Yi family. She feared her father and brother's ambitions, knowing too well the principle of prosperity followed by decline. Her guilt towards Wei Ying was genuine. It was a debt owed by the Yi family, and Qingqiao thought she had to repay it on behalf of her father and brother in this lifetime. The Jiafeng Hall had long been cleared of the late empress's belongings, but she still disliked the place. Naturally, Lu Kuang was also unwilling to set foot there. However, every month, there were always a few days he had to visit the central palace. Forcing oneself to be close to someone they loathed, Qingqiao did not know which of them was more pitiful. She heard him murmur in his sleep, calling out, A-Xing again and again. Qingqiao thought the cruelest thing for him was waking up from his dreams to see her instead. And the cruelest thing for a woman was living her entire life in the shadow of another woman. Perhaps to forget the pain, he began to indulge in pleasure, hunting and feasting every day, becoming known throughout the land as a fatuous ruler. Your father is quite relieved seeing him like this. Lady Yi often visited her daughter in the palace, talking about Lu Kuang's many misdeeds and then sighing, "But why is there still no news from your belly?" It was the 3rd year of her marriage to him. Despite being husband and wife, they were still incredibly distant. Finally, by the 5th year, the Yi family could no longer sit still. "Empress! Empress!" came the urgent cries from outside the hall. It was Wang Shi, the eunuch who served Lu Kuang. He rushed into the hall and fell to his knees before Qingqiao. "Please, Your Majesty, you must go to Weiyang Palace." His Majesty, Upon arriving at Weiyang Palace, she saw her brother, flanked by the imperial guards, surrounding the main hall. As she burst into the hall, she saw dozens of trembling imperial physicians kneeling inside, quaking like leaves in the wind. Grand Tutor Yi wore a stern expression, and when he saw Qingqiao burst in, he scolded angrily, "What are you doing here?" The physicians, seeing her as their last hope, hurriedly kowtowed and begged her for mercy. Of all the people in the hall, only Lu Kuang remained indifferent. From the moment she entered, he did not even lift his gaze. "Father, please calm down. Calm down." Grand Tutor Yi gritted his teeth. "Do you know what these people have done?" Qingqiao already knew the cause of today's incident from Wang Shi on the way. Her expression remained unchanged. They were merely following orders. "You're right, they were just following orders. Who would dare give the Empress contraceptive medicine?" "Your Majesty." Grand Tutor Yi laughed coldly, turning to Lu Kuang. "Who do you think gave the order? Who would most want to prevent the Empress from becoming pregnant?" The answer was obvious. After 5 years without issue, Grand Tutor Yi had long been suspicious. Lu Kuang's eyes were indifferent as he replied calmly, "Nowadays, all decrees are issued by the Grand Tutor. The throne's succession to the Grand Tutor is as easy as a snap of the fingers. Even my life is determined by the Grand Tutor. Whatever the Grand Tutor says, that is what it is." "Good, very good. Father." Qingqiao suddenly raised her voice. "The order these people followed was mine." "Qing'er," Yi Shao shouted angrily. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "I am not speaking nonsense," she said, lifting her skirt as she knelt before Grand Tutor Yi. "If blame is to be assigned, let it fall on me." Qingqiao looked up at her father's astonished and furious face. "Father, do you not believe me? This child, I truly did not want it. Do you know why?" Grand Tutor Yi stared at her in shock. Qingqiao smiled bitterly. "Because I was afraid that if I had a child, I would lose my husband." To Lu Kuang, the succession of the throne was no longer difficult for the Yi family. If she truly bore a prince, supporting a young emperor would be the best choice for the Yi family. "Everyone leave," Yi Shao shouted. Once everyone had left the hall, Qingqiao turned to look at Lu Kuang and said softly, "Father, from the day I married him, I was not just the empress of this realm, but also his wife." Qingqiao became pregnant the following spring. The palace servants did not know what had transpired that day in Weiyang Palace, only that after that, the emperor's attitude towards the empress finally improved, especially after she became pregnant. As soon as summer arrived, he took her to the summer palace to escape the heat. Accompanying them was Yi Shao's daughter, her little niece Hongying. Hongying adored her aunt and eagerly anticipated the arrival of her cousin. Every day, she would carefully place her hands on Qingqiao's slightly rounded belly and ask, "Is little brother behaving today? Has he kicked you, aunt?" "Does A-Xing want a brother?" A-Xing nodded vigorously and then asked, "What about Aunt?" Qingqiao smiled and patted the little girl's head. "Aunt wants a sister as pretty as A-Xing." The eunuch behind her was about to speak when Lu Kuang, standing not far away, gestured for him to remain silent. Suddenly, she recalled that day when she knelt in the hall, clutching her father's robe and pleading, "Since I am his wife, we will share life and death." Her voice was resolute, even forcing Grand Tutor Yi to relent and promise, "Father agrees. Even if you bear a prince, the throne will not change hands." But despite that, now she still said she wanted a daughter. For him, having a daughter would be the safest choice. The two of them seemed to have become a typical couple, with Lu Kuang treating her with meticulous care and gentle understanding. In that same year, the southern four counties rose in rebellion. Grand Tutor Yi personally went south to suppress the revolt. Although the rebellion was quelled, he sustained severe injuries and remained unconscious when he was sent back to the capital. The Yi family was thrown into chaos, and the entire court was turned upside down. At that time, Qingqiao was already heavily pregnant, her feet swollen to the point where she couldn't even visit her father. One night, a storm rolled in, the thunder and rain making it impossible to sleep. Just then, a eunuch burst into her chamber. "Your Majesty, someone has led troops into the summer palace and is headed this way." Panic only lasted for a moment before she quickly regained her composure and asked, "Where is His Majesty?" The one who had taken it upon himself to lead the troops was Qingqiao's cousin, Yi Hui. From a young age, he had followed his uncle, Grand Tutor Yi, into many battles, commanding troops at an early age. After defeating the Hor family, many of Yi family's younger generation had urged Grand Tutor Yi to declare himself emperor. For years, they had been suppressed by Grand Tutor Yi, so they did not dare make a move. Now, with Grand Tutor Yi's fate unknown, various factions began to stir. Yi Hui urged Yi Shao to seize the opportunity to kill Lu Kuang and claim the throne. A straightforward soldier, Yi Hui acted on his own when Yi Shao did not heed his advice. When Yi Hui's troops arrived at the Hall of Diligent Administration, they found the soldiers at the front unwilling to move. As he went forward, he saw his cousin, now Empress Qingqiao, standing alone at the hall's entrance. "If you want to enter, you'll have to kill me first," Qingqiao said calmly, showing no fear. "So, His Majesty is just a coward hiding behind a woman," Yi Hui sneered. "Sister, have you forgotten you are a Yi family member after marrying him?" Despite his harsh words, all the Yi family brothers had protected Qingqiao since they were young, and none dared truly harm her. When Yi Shao arrived at the summer palace after hearing the news, Yi Hui had already broken into the Hall of Diligent Administration. The guards lay slaughtered, and in the corner, Qingqiao stood with a sword, protecting Lu Kuang. Corpses were scattered on the ground. She glared at Yi Hui, pale and trembling. "Qinger," Yi Shao called out, but she raised her sword towards him. "Everyone withdraw," he commanded Yi Hui's soldiers. He then looked at his sister and said, "Rest assured, I won't harm him. Put down the sword." The blood on her sword was evident, showing she had been struggling fiercely before he arrived. "Brother," Qingqiao whispered, pleading softly, "don't hurt him." Her lips were bloodless, and she was on the verge of collapse. Yi Shao quickly nodded in agreement, but she suddenly swayed and fell to the ground, her lower garments soaked in blood. The child was lost, and she narrowly escaped death herself, with the imperial physician warning she might never conceive again. With the loss of her child, she also lost her father. From that year, Yi Shao took over the control of the Yi family and the entire court. In the first few years, the political situation was unstable. However, the lingering influence of Grand Tutor Yi and Yi Shao's own abilities eventually stabilized the situation, with both the court and the harem under Yi family's control. 3 years later, a concubine gave birth to a prince. Before the child was a month old, he was taken to Changqiu Palace to be raised by Qingqiao as if he were her own. Lu Kuang named the child Cheng. Although he was his firstborn, Lu Kuang showed little interest, immersing himself in painting and spending his days with students from the art academy, ignoring all else. Therefore, Lu Cheng was raised personally by Qingchao. His biological mother died shortly after his birth, and Qingchao took care of him from infancy. Cheng'er's first words, his first steps, his studies, and his tutor's praises, all these brought smiles to Qingchao's face. She treated him as her own, and like him, she no longer concerned herself with court affairs, trusting everything to her brother. With Yi Shao, peace would naturally prevail. Yi Shao died in the 10th year of his rule over the Yi family. Qingchao was the last to know of his death. Before Lu Kuang made his move, he had her confined to Changqiu Palace, even preventing her from seeing Yi Cheng. It wasn't until a month later that she was released from Changqiu Palace. By then, the Yi family's influence had been completely eradicated, the court purged by blood. The only remnant of the Yi family was her, the empress. Lu Kuang had spent years pretending to be indifferent to politics, secretly liaising with ministers and sending messages out through art academy students. He had allied with the northern tribes, who had tied down the Yi family's northern forces, leaving Yi Shao isolated in the capital. Qingchao's eyes had been ruined from crying the night she learned of Yi Shao's plight. She couldn't see clearly afterward, though the palace servants dared not tell her the full truth. In reality, Yi Shao had been killed by a barrage of arrows, his death gruesome. Even her newly married niece, Honging, had been forced by her husband's family to commit suicide by poison. The entire Yi family was exterminated overnight. The ministers debated endlessly on how to deal with Qingchao, but those closest to Lu Kuang advised that the roots must be eradicated. Qingchao thought Lu Kuang wouldn't want to keep her either. When she had walked into Weiyang Palace that day, seeing him holding Wei Ying's body and the look of hatred he gave her, she knew that the resentment would never be extinguished. For over 10 years, they had been married. His subsequent kindness was merely for her father and brother to see. She had been his lifeline, and his feigned affection had earned her genuine protection. She wasn't oblivious to this, but emotions are never under one's control. To everyone's surprise, Lu Kuang only demoted her from empress to consort. On the day she moved out of Changqiu Palace, Lu Kuang personally came to see her. Old grudges and new enmities had tangled between them, and it was impossible to say who owed whom more. "Rest assured, I will at least ensure you live out your days in peace," he said coldly, unwilling to look at her, his gaze fixed elsewhere. "Consider it repayment for saving my life in the hall of diligent administration." In truth, she had saved him more than once. She only smiled and said, "I would rather join my mother and brother." As Lu Kuang left, he glanced back at her, this woman who had been his wife for over a decade. He remembered her beauty in her youth, renowned throughout the capital. Living with her day and night, her stunning looks often tempted him to fall for her, to cherish her genuinely. But he had to remind himself time and again to quash those feelings. Now, she seemed to have aged overnight. The beauty that once captivated everyone had faded, and at such a young age, strands of white already streaked her hair. His pretense was flawless, but in truth, he had no idea what to do with her. Just seeing her standing there threw his mind into disarray. So, it would be better not to see her again. He turned away and stepped out of the hall. From then on, this woman would no longer be his wife. In later generations, when people spoke of Empress Xiaoren, Yi Qingchao, it was widely known that she was not favored by Emperor Ming. Once Emperor Ming was no longer under the control of the Yi family, he moved her to Yongmen Palace and never summoned her again, completely neglecting her. The palace servants, always fawning on those in power, saw that the emperor ignored Yi Fei, so the Yeding Bureau naturally paid her no attention either, making Qingchao's life difficult. Her health was poor. The child she had lost was nearly full term, depleting her vitality and leaving her with lasting ailments that never improved. The only comfort was that Cheng'er was very filial, visiting her daily. Despite being disliked by the ministers for being raised by Qingchao, he was still the emperor's firstborn son, his bloodline. Because of him, Lu Kuang's concubines didn't dare to overly trouble her. Her illness worsened, with headaches sometimes causing her to faint, drenching her clothes with sweat. Lu Cheng was at his wit's end, summoning the best physicians in the Imperial Medical Bureau, but none could find an effective remedy. One day, Qingchao awoke to the sound of faint sobbing beside her. Her vision was poor, and she had to strain to see clearly. Jiai? Jiai was Lu Kuang's eldest daughter, only slightly younger than Qing'er. Her mother, the former Liang Gui Ren, now Liang Gui Fei, had been under Qingchao's care as the empress. Jiai had adored her stepmother since she was a child. "Your Highness, does it hurt a lot?" Jiai cried, holding her hand. Qingchao wanted to shake her head, but the pain in her head was like insects gnawing at her brain, making her teeth chatter. "No." Lu Qing stood up suddenly. "I'm going to see father." "No," she said weakly. "Cheng, I'm not in pain, it's okay." Her forehead was drenched in sweat, but she refused to let him go. Cheng'er understood. His father's indifference towards her and her status as a member of the Yi family made her a thorn in many people's sides. Those who had risked everything to help his father overthrow the Yi family needed reassurance, and treating her this way was his father's means of stabilizing their loyalty. Cheng'er didn't dare go against her wishes, but Jiai rushed to Lu Kuang. At that time, Liang Gui Fei was with Lu Kuang. Seeing her daughter pleading for that woman, she hid her anger behind a calm facade. "Father, please go see Her Highness." Lu Kuang was momentarily stunned, turning his back to avoid being noticed. "Jiai, don't be foolish," Liang Gui Fei scolded. "Do you think your father's visit will cure her?" "But Her Highness," Jiai cried, "she must really want to see father." "You're wrong, Jiai," Lu Kuang said softly. "She doesn't want to see me." He had slaughtered her entire family. How could she possibly want to see him? Though she differed from her father and brothers, she was still a Yi. In truth, they had seen each other over the years. Although she always claimed illness to avoid the grand ceremonies all concubines attended, she would still go to Jiai's birthday celebrations every year. Every year, he instructed his people to spare no effort in celebrating Jiai's birthday. Amid the crowd, he could see her standing far away, apart from everyone. Her poor eyesight meant she always kept her head down, walking cautiously. Their eyes never met, and he would only glance at her briefly, nothing more. Time flowed like clouds drifting away. Half a lifetime had passed, filled with too much love and hatred, leaving them forever separated, close yet distant, never truly connected. In the palace, everyone said that it was no wonder the emperor's most beloved daughter was the one who softened his heart to post a decree for physicians to treat the lady in Yong'an Palace. In the end, it was thanks to Princess Jiai's favor. Not only Jiai, but Lu Cheng also gained more favor from Lu Kuang, but he earned it through his own merit, excelling in both literary and martial arts among all the princes. He even broke his leg practicing archery, and when Lu Kuang came to see him, he overheard Lu Cheng instructing his attendants, "No one is to let Yong'an Palace know about my injury." Lu Kuang paused. This echoed his own previous orders not to let news of Lu Cheng's injuries reach Yong'an Palace. She would worry. Lu Cheng was somewhat overwhelmed by his father's personal visit. Lu Kuang said sternly, "It's just archery practice. Why push yourself so hard? Why must you strive to be the best at everything? What's wrong with losing to your brothers?" Lu Cheng lowered his head and said softly, "If I don't excel, what will happen to my mother?" For a long while, Lu Cheng heard no response from his father. When he looked up, he saw an unusual sorrow in the eyes of his typically stern and imposing father. "Then you should take better care of yourself." Lu Kuang's voice was hoarse. "Do you know why your mother endures such suffering? You fear she'll have no support. She fears the same for you." Upon hearing this, Lu Cheng's eyes reddened. Everyone believed that, being from the Yi family, she was ambitious like the infamous Lu and her families. No one believed that the daughter of Grand Preceptor Yi could be truly kind and gentle. The hatred for the Yi family now naturally fell upon her alone. As the princes grew older, debates over the heir apparent intensified in court. It was obvious to everyone that Lu Kuang favored his eldest son, Lu Cheng, the most, but the ministers supported the third prince, Lu Dan, son of Liang Guifei. Because of this, Liang Guifei forbade Jiai from visiting Yeoman Palace anymore. Qing Chao understood, so for Jiai's birthday that year, she only sent gifts through palace servants. That night, she repeatedly asked the returning servant if the princess was happy and what she had said. Just as the maid was about to speak, she saw a tall figure at the door and hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Qing Chao did not turn around and did not know what expression he had at that moment. It was a long time before she heard him speak. "If you want to see Jiai, I can still have her visit you often." "No need," she said softly. "There's no need to create discord between her and her mother. She has her own mother." Jiai had her own mother, so she was not Qing Chao's daughter. He suddenly remembered that year at Tongshan Palace when she had smiled and said to her little niece, "Auntie wishes for a sister as beautiful as A-Xing." Strangely, after all these years, he could clearly recall every expression she had back then. She wore a light green palace dress, her hair loosely tied up, and the early summer sunlight softly shining behind her, her eyes filled with gentle warmth. And her slightly rounded belly carried his child. From afar, with just one glance, he felt a surge of affection. Now, after the passage of time, her beauty had faded, her hair was graying, and she still remembered the child that never saw the world, the daughter she longed for. Lu Kuang was determined to establish Lu Cheng as the crown prince, but just as the decree was drafted, an incident occurred. They said it was an accident, but how could it be such a coincidence? Too many in the court did not want the throne to eventually fall into Lu Cheng's hands, as it would mean Qing Chao would become the Empress Dowager, and if she sought revenge for the Yi family, it would make many noble families who once opposed the Yi family very uneasy. There was no time to investigate the perpetrator. His first order was to seal the news. "If Yeoman Palace finds out, don't bother coming to see me again." He gritted his teeth, pointing at the eunuchs kneeling in the hall. He had someone tell Qing Chao that Lu Cheng was sent to the military for training, and each month, letters were forged in her son's handwriting. But how long could this news be hidden? Within a year, sudden bad news came from Yeoman Palace. No one knew how she found out. The servants said that the previous night, she was fine when they served her to bed, but in the morning, she was found lying on her couch, still holding a piece of broken gold. She passed away during the night. By the time the imperial physicians arrived, her body was cold, but he refused to enter and instead forced the kneeling physicians outside the hall to prescribe medicine to save her. But matters of life and death are beyond even an emperor's control. The physicians trembled in fear while wondering in their hearts, when had the emperor ever cared so much about Consort Yi? "Useless. Useless," he roared, suddenly remembering something. "Right, Jiai. She likes Jiai. Bring the princess here." Jiai, crying her eyes out, was led in. Lu Kuang dragged his daughter to her bedside. After some time, the body was no longer stiff, and the skin had softened again. She lay there with her eyes closed, as if asleep. He stared in a daze, afraid to get closer. Jiai had already thrown herself over her, and with bloodshot eyes and a hoarse voice, he urged, "Jiai, call her to wake up, call her. Maybe she won't want to leave." Jiai cried, her hairpins falling apart as he pulled her roughly, but he didn't care. The only thought in his mind was to wake her. Someone behind him tugged at his sleeve. It was Liang Guifei who had hurried over. "Your Majesty, this is not her daughter. This is my daughter." His pupils shrank, feeling as if something had pierced his heart deeply. Indeed, this was not her daughter. She had no children, and with Cheng gone, she had nothing left. Everything she had cared for had been taken away by fate. After all these years, he had given her nothing. When Jiai was born, she adored her. At that time, her brother was in power. Even he had to look at Yi Xiao's face. So he ordered the princess to be taken to Jiaofeng Hall, saying she should be raised under the empress's care, but soon after, she sent the child back to Liang Guiren. She didn't know that he had ordered contraceptive medicine to be added to her food. Those things damaged her body, and even without the Tangshan Palace incident, that child could never have been born. When A-Xing passed away, she went to Shanxi Hall, feigning sympathy. Each time she protected him, it was for the position of empress. Her kindness to Jia and Chang'e was also for her own sake. All these could be explained. How could she genuinely be kind and compassionate? She was the daughter of Grand Preceptor Yi Xiao's sister. How could she have a good heart? Impossible. He remembered the day she moved from Changqiu Palace, when he went to see her and said, "In this life, there is too much enmity between us. It is destined we cannot be together. Perhaps in the next life, we can be an ordinary couple." She suddenly looked up at him and said, "But in the next life, I don't wish to be married to your majesty." His gaze dimmed, and he heard her continue softly, "Because I hope in the next life, your majesty can be with the one you truly love." How could such a person exist in this world? How could he have met her? She was just too good at acting, from beginning to end, only trying to gain his sympathy. He shouldn't feel sad for her. She was the daughter of the Yi family, and all of this was just karma. Stumbling outside, he saw the hibiscus tree in the courtyard in bloom. When she married him, Changqiu Palace was also filled with hibiscus, blooming overnight after her arrival. She was delighted, but he ordered them all cut down. Wei-Ying loved hibiscus. It was planted for her. Why should someone else enjoy them? She looked at him, eyes filled with a plea, but he ignored it. Later, he learned that hibiscus was her favorite too. He pointed to the hibiscus in the courtyard and ordered, "Cut it down. No hibiscus is allowed in the palace from now on." The palace servants knew well not to mention Empress Xiaoren in front of the emperor. It was a forbidden topic. After all, everything related to the Yi family was deeply detested by him. It was said that the emperor's illness was a result of the grief over the death of the crown prince, which led him to excessive sorrow. He relied on decoctions for 10 years, but eventually, he could not hold on any longer. By then, Princess Jia had already married off. She hurriedly returned to the palace that night. Before the emperor passed away, he would only see his daughter. "Actually, I was afraid to die." Lu Kuang grasped his daughter's hand and said with difficulty, "I was afraid to see your elder brother." He struggled with each breath and refused to let the imperial physicians enter. He continued slowly, if he asks me, why I did not take good care of his mother." Over the years, he had forbidden anyone from mentioning that person's name, including himself, but Jia understood what he was truly referring to. She cried and said, "The Empress never blamed you. But I was afraid to see her, afraid to see her." The only words Emperor Ming repeated before he died were these, to the point where his eyes remained open when he passed away. She said, "In the next life, I do not wish to be married to you." Then let them never meet again. If there is a next life, he must make sure to miss her from the start. He would never again make her sad, never again make her cry. The fleeting clouds are easily scattered, and the clear moon is hard to come by. She was his eternal concern, his eternal debt.